It all started on a clear spring morning when the air was crisp, the birds were singing, and the first golden rays of sunlight painted the rolling hills surrounding our property in Willow Creek, a town where everyone knew each other's business. And the HOA had long since established itself as the tyrant king. My grandfather, a wiry old man with a white beard, thick as a winter storm, and eyes that sparkled with mischief, sat on the porch beside me, rocking back and forth in his creaky old chair while chewing thoughtfully on a piece of straw, both of us admiring the newly completed pond that glistened like a jewel in the center of our land. For months we had toiled to bring this pond to life, carefully studying the soil composition, the drainage patterns, and the best location that would neither infringe on neighboring properties nor disrupt the delicate balance of nature. And we were proud of the result. A peaceful sanctuary destined to attract ducks, geese, and maybe even fish, as Grandpa liked to imagine. A slice of paradise carved out of our sweat and determination. And yet we both knew that this newfound serenity would not go unchallenged for long, not with Eleanor Strickland, the HOA president, looming like a vulture hungry for control. Eleanor was notorious around Willow Creek, wielding the HOA rulebook like a weapon, enforcing absurd regulations on everything from the height of grass blades to the color of seasonal wreaths, a woman who thrived on micromanagement and had long eyed our property with a mixture of envy and disdain. Her constant attempts to extend the HOA's reach to our borders rebuffed time and again by county zoning maps that firmly placed us outside her jurisdiction, much to her irritation. As if summoned by our very thoughts, the familiar roar of Eleanor's silver SUV disrupted the morning calm, a trail of dust spiraling behind her as she barreled up the gravel driveway with the aggression of someone on a mission, slamming the vehicle into park before throwing open the door and stepping out with the practiced authority of a dictator, descending upon rebellious subjects. Clipboard clutched in one hand, smartphone in the other, her high heels clicking sharply against the gravel as she made her way toward us with narrowed eyes and a face pinched tight with fury. "Mr. Dawson," she began with venom lacing every syllable, her voice sharp enough to cut steel, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth and the moment, allowing her indignation to hang heavy in the air before responding with calm indifference. "Digging a pond," as if the gleaming body of water before us left any ambiguity. Grandpa let out a low chuckle beside me, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees, eyes twinkling with the same mischievous energy that had defined his younger days. "Ma'am, this here land has been agricultural since my granddaddy's time. Ain't no HOA governance out here," he said with deliberate slowness, as though explaining basic arithmetic to a child. Eleanor's face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening as her grip on the clipboard whitened. "You are in clear violation of Section 14B, subsection 3 of the Willow Creek HOA Covenant," she spat, brandishing the clipboard like a sword, her voice rising with each word. "You cannot just dig a pond without proper approval." Grandpa remained, unfazed, offering her nothing more than a patient smile. "This is county land, Eleanor. The permits are in order. You might want to check your maps again." For a moment, her composure wavered, but years of bullying homeowners had conditioned her to never back down easily, and she quickly regained her footing. "This pond poses a threat to the surrounding properties," she declared, turning to her phone and snapping photos as though evidence of our crime lay hidden beneath the calm surface of the water. "Runoff, soil erosion, ecological disturbance, this will not stand." Grandpa's voice remained steady. "We installed proper drainage and followed every county regulation, consulted with environmental experts, and even had the water table assessed. Everything's by the book." The tension hung thick between us, broken only by the distant calls of migrating geese and the hum of bees busy in the blossoming wildflowers nearby. Eleanor, sensing that she was losing ground, retreated to her SUV without another word, slamming the door behind her and speeding away in a cloud of dust. But we both knew this was far from over, for a woman like Eleanor thrived on conflict, and the thought of being bested on legal grounds would only fuel her resolve. Sure enough, by mid-afternoon, she returned with county code enforcers in tow, 2 men in crisp uniforms who inspected every inch of the property with quiet diligence, measuring distances, reviewing permits, taking photographs, and double-checking. Compliance against a thick stack of regulatory documents we had painstakingly collected over months of planning. Grandpa and I stood by silently, confident in our preparations, while Eleanor hovered like a hawk, whispering accusations and pointing dramatically at imagined infractions. But after what felt like hours, the lead inspector finally turned to her with a curt shake of his head. "Everything appears compliant, Miss Strickland," he said firmly. "They followed all proper channels and regulations. The county has no issue here." Her mouth opened as if to protest, but the officer continued, cutting her off. "Furthermore, your HOA jurisdiction does not extend to this parcel." The sting of public rejection was evident in the way her face twitched, her knuckles whitening around the clipboard as she struggled to maintain composure, retreating once more to her vehicle, with a sharp turn that suggested this battle was far from finished in her mind. In the following days, Eleanor's campaign of harassment escalated, and we found ourselves the target of anonymous noise complaints citing disturbances that never occurred, false reports of unauthorized structures sprouting mysteriously in official records, and even accusations of environmental contamination that were promptly dismissed upon inspection. The endless parade of officials and paperwork would have been exhausting were it not for Grandpa's steady presence, his unwavering patience, a calming force as we weathered the bureaucratic storm with smiles and an ever-growing collection of dismissed complaints. Yet beneath his calm exterior, I saw the glint of frustration building, and one evening as the sun dipped low and bathed the pond in golden hues, Grandpa rose from his chair with a determined glint in his eye that spoke of a plan forming. "We need to teach that woman a lesson," he said, his voice low and measured. "What do you have in mind?" I asked cautiously, though I suspected he had been concocting something for days. "Trust me, boy. Just have that camera ready when she comes back." Over the next few days, Grandpa worked with quiet purpose, reinforcing the pond's muddy perimeter with bales of hay, artfully concealed beneath a thin layer of gravel, creating what appeared to be a solid path, but would quickly give way under significant weight, all the while whistling an old tune that hinted at the satisfaction of a plan well formed. His preparations were meticulous, ensuring the setup was both effective and safe, minimizing risk while maximizing the chance for Eleanor's inevitable overreach to backfire spectacularly. The bait was set, and we didn't have to wait long. The following week, Eleanor returned with full force, her silver SUV accompanied by a small convoy that included additional HOA board members, code enforcers, and, to our mild amusement, a local news crew she had recruited to document what she, no doubt, expected to be our public shaming. Cameras rolled as she stepped out of her SUV, dressed sharply in her signature pink blazer, her hair meticulously styled, and her face arranged into a mask of righteous indignation. "Mr. Dawson," she called out loudly, ensuring the cameras captured every syllable. "Your blatant disregard for community safety and regulations has forced the HOA to take formal action." I stood beside Grandpa on the porch, arms crossed, offering only a raised eyebrow in response while Grandpa remained seated, rocking gently as if watching a particularly amusing scene unfold before him. "You're trespassing, Eleanor," Grandpa said calmly. "This pond is legally permitted, and you've got no authority here." Undeterred, she gestured dramatically toward the pond, addressing the cameras. "This hazardous, unapproved structure threatens the environmental integrity of the entire community. The HOA has voted unanimously to demand its immediate removal." The spectacle unfolded precisely as Grandpa had predicted, with Eleanor marching confidently toward the pond's edge, instructing the cameraman to capture close-up shots of the so-called environmental disaster. "Careful there, Eleanor," Grandpa. warned, his voice carrying a note of playful caution. "The ground's a bit soft." She shot him a scornful glance, dismissing his warning with a wave of her hand as she stepped forward onto the deceptive gravel, her high heels clicking confidently until, with a sudden squelch, her foot sank into the hidden mud beneath. She yelped, stumbling briefly but quickly regaining composure, yanking her foot free with visible frustration, her pristine heels now caked in mud as gasps rippled through her entourage while the cameras continued to roll. Flustered but determined not to let the moment derail her spectacle, she turned sharply and stomped back toward her SUV, but Grandpa was already in motion, moving with surprising speed and purpose as he retrieved the heavy chain he had prepared, calmly looping it around the rear axle of her SUV and securing the other end to the old tractor he had parked nearby. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" I whispered, a grin tugging at my lips despite the absurdity of the situation. "Teaching a lesson," he replied simply, climbing onto the tractor seat and firing up the engine with a satisfying roar. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the tractor lurched forward, the heavy chain pulling taut before the SUV began to slide backward, its tires skidding helplessly across the gravel and toward the softened bank of the pond. Eleanor's scream pierced the air as the rear wheels dipped into the water first, followed by the front as the SUV sank with a loud splash, the muddy water swallowing it slowly until only the roof and antenna remained visible. The camera crew captured every moment in crystal clarity, their expressions a mix of shock and fascination, while the HOA board members stood frozen, mouths agape, unsure whether to intervene or feign ignorance. Eleanor, now shrieking with fury, pointed a trembling finger at Grandpa. "You'll pay for this! This is destruction of private property. I'll sue you for every penny you've got." Grandpa dismounted the tractor, tipping his hat with a calm smile as he approached. "You can try, ma'am, but you were trespassing on private property. County. Law's pretty clear on that." The video footage spread like wildfire across social media within hours. The title, "HOA President Gets Instant Karma," trending nationwide as viewers reveled in the spectacle of a tyrant undone by her own hubris. Public opinion turned swiftly against Eleanor, and even her staunchest supporters within the HOA distanced themselves, calling emergency meetings to discuss her removal. The legal battle she had threatened never materialized, her lawyers advising against pursuing a case that would undoubtedly fail under the weight of documented evidence and public ridicule. In the weeks that followed, peace returned to our land, the pond flourishing as wildlife flocked to its waters, the sunsets casting breathtaking reflections as Grandpa and I resumed our evening routine on the porch, sipping coffee and listening to the gentle symphony of nature. "Told you, boy," Grandpa said with a satisfied grin. "Sometimes the best way to handle a bully is to let 'em sink themselves." And as the stars twinkled to life above us, I couldn't help but agree, knowing we had not only defended our home but delivered a lesson that would echo through Willow Creek for years to come. The quiet morning mist rose slowly from the surface of the pond, wrapping the land in a gentle shroud as the sun crept over the treetops, casting golden beams across our property that glistened off the water like 1,000 tiny diamonds. And, for the first time in what felt like ages, peace truly settled over Willow Creek. But as Grandpa and I sat on the porch sipping our coffee, we both knew that peace had been hard-fought and hard-won, and though Eleanor's desperate attempts at revenge had failed, the final chapter of this saga wasn't completely closed yet. In small towns like ours, grudges can linger like smoke from an old fire, and while the law had finally caught up with her, Eleanor's name still hovered like a shadow over Willow Creek. After her arrest for attempted ecological sabotage, Eleanor faced not only legal consequences, but the scorn of an entire community that had grown tired of her relentless crusade. The court sentenced her to substantial community service hours, hefty fines, and psychological evaluation, citing her obsessive behavior and dangerous vendettas. The HOA board moved swiftly to expel her permanently, electing in her place a level-headed man named Mr. Holloway, who immediately set about restoring order and repairing the HOA's damaged reputation. Mr. Holloway reached out to us personally, offering not only an apology, but also assurances that our property rights would be respected moving forward, making clear that the HOA would no longer be a vehicle for personal grudges. Grandpa, ever the pragmatist, accepted his handshake, but with guarded optimism. "People can change," Grandpa said afterward, "but I trust actions more than words." And sure enough, over the following months, Mr. Holloway's actions demonstrated his sincerity. The HOA implemented new bylaws that limited presidential powers, introduced community votes on major decisions, and established clearer boundaries on private property rights, ensuring that no future HOA president could ever wield the kind of unchecked authority Eleanor had once enjoyed. Our little pond, the spark of this entire conflict, was officially recognized as compliant and protected by both state and local authorities. Meanwhile, Eleanor's fall from grace became something of a cautionary tale. Once the self-appointed queen of the HOA, she was now a pariah, spotted occasionally at the edge of town performing her court-ordered service, picking up trash, painting fences, or scrubbing graffiti while neighbors and former allies averted their eyes. Her once influential voice was now a whisper, heard only by those few who still gossiped about the scandal, but no longer dared associate themselves with her. The internet had immortalized her downfall through countless memes, videos, and retellings of the infamous SUV plunge into the pond, turning her humiliation into viral content that even years later would occasionally resurface. For Grandpa and me, life slowly returned to a gentle rhythm. The pond flourished, teeming with fish, frogs, and ducks, while dragonflies danced above the lily pads and deer came to drink at dawn. Grandpa built a small dock where we'd sit with fishing poles, sharing quiet conversations while the water gently lapped against the wood. We repaired the gravel road, reinforced the fence, and even planted wildflowers along the pond's edge, transforming the place into a small sanctuary. "This is how it was always meant to be," Grandpa would say with quiet satisfaction, his weathered face breaking into a peaceful smile. Neighbors who had once kept their distance now came by more often, sometimes with baked pies, sometimes to sit and chat, and sometimes just to say they were glad everything had worked out. The shared ordeal had brought the community closer, reminding everyone how dangerous unchecked power could be, and how important it was to stand up for what's right, even in the face of intimidation. One particularly warm summer afternoon, Grandpa received a letter in the mail. It was from the state's Environmental Board, not with more accusations, but with recognition. The careful way we had constructed the pond had actually improved the land's biodiversity and water management, earning us a small grant to continue maintaining the area as a designated local habitat. Grandpa chuckled as he read the letter, aloud. "Funny how something that nearly tore us apart is now what they're rewarding us for," he said. "That's life for you." Even with all the drama behind us, Eleanor's face would occasionally flash through my mind. I wondered sometimes whether she regretted any of it, or whether she still sat somewhere fuming, blaming us for her own choices. But in the end, it didn't matter. She was gone from our lives, and her power had evaporated like the mist that morning. The land was healing, the community was healing, and most importantly, we were free. That fall, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew crisp, Grandpa and I hosted a small gathering at the pond for our neighbors, a sort of unofficial celebration of the peace we had finally secured. Children ran along the shoreline, dogs barked and splashed in the water, and the smell of roasted corn and grilled meats filled the air. Mr. Holloway gave a short speech thanking everyone for their resilience and unity, making no mention of Eleanor by name, but everyone knew who he meant. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Grandpa clapped me on the back and whispered, "Well, son, I reckon that's that. And I knew he was right. The long war was over, not with a bang, but with the gentle lapping of pond water, the hum of cicadas, and the laughter of neighbors who had weathered the storm together. The legacy of Eleanor's tyranny would fade, but the pond, the symbol of our stubborn stand for what was right, would remain long after all the shouting had stopped. And in that stillness, with the stars beginning to blink into the sky, I felt it completely for the first time. Peace. Real, lasting peace.